The murder of Donald Mackay and the mystery of the Nugan Hand Bank are two of the enduring riddles of Australian history. But were these two mysteries related? While I was researching the history of the Australian drug trade, I discovered the two mysteries were closely intertwined. Following the Vietnam War, the Whitlam government broke from Australia's traditional subservience to US foreign policy to pursue an independent foreign policy. This angered US President Richard Nixon, who authorized the director of the Eastern Division of the CIA, Ted Shackley, to start a dirty tricks campaign against Whitlam. Ted Shackley was what those in the trade call a quadruple threat: drugs, arms, money, murder. His mastery of the quadruple threat began during the secret war in Laos and reached its climax in the Nugan Hand Bank. Michael Hand, one of the founders of the Nugan Hand Bank, was an ex-Green Beret who had worked for Shackley's Opium Army during the secret war in Laos. He got his start in the drug trade there, smuggling heroin home in the body bags of dead soldiers. In Sydney, he met a crooked young lawyer named Frank Nugan. They became the biggest thing the Australian drug trade has ever seen.
Former bank executive Neil Evans, given immunity from prosecution, agreed to talk about the Nugan Hand operation on Australian television.
We were to become the paymasters for the CIA around the world. In other words, we were putting ourselves in a position to disperse funds for the CIA to whoever they were directed.
Nugan Hand sent Neil Evans to the Thai city of Chiang Mai, the commercial center of the drug trade. He claims the CIA made millions and used the money to finance some of its secret projects.
The idea was that money would be deposited with the Nugan Hand Bank by the CIA through various channels, and also that the Nugan Hand Bank would be the repository for funds coming in from various CIA enterprises, namely drugs in Thailand, marijuana in particular, and that the Nugan Hand Bank would then be responsible for rerouting that money to an account in America with a New York bank.
With access to the US market, Frank Nugan's organisation was growing cannabis on an industrial scale. In the weeks before Donald Mackay disappeared, a scandal erupted at the Nugan packing shed when the auditors discovered secret accounts in the names of the local marijuana growers. Members of these families were involved with a huge cannabis plantation at Coleambally in 1975. The secret accounts suggest that the Coleambally crop was being grown for Frank Nugan. The gangster tactics that Frank Nugan used to hush up the affair provide further corroboration. When the auditors and independent directors of the Nugan Group tried to find out more about these secret accounts, Frank Nugan responded by seeking to remove the auditors and by intimidating the opposition directors. The intimidation was impressive. The man Frank Nugan hired as his private investigator was Fred Cray.
Frederick Claude Cray, a descendant of a German immigrant family from the northern New South Wales Tenterfield area. He became a detective, and he was probably the chief killer in, and I know this sounds terrible, but he was the assassin in the New South Wales Police Force. He murdered quite a number of people.
Cray was forced to retire from the New South Wales police force after the murder of Shirley Briffman. He became a private detective, an Australian version of Murder Incorporated. The Nugan auditors were from Sydney and had no idea that the secret accounts might be for marijuana growing. But there was one man in Griffith who could understand that code. 2 weeks into Cray's investigation, Don Mackay disappeared. On the morning of his death, he was told by a local reporter that Fred Cray was back in town. "I wonder what his job is this time," he said. The troublesome auditors were removed at a specially convened meeting of the Nugan Group. In the days before the meeting, new shareholders were rounded up from inner-city hotels by the Nugan's detective, Fred Cray. With this legion of thugs and drunks, the Nugans forced the removal of the auditors.
You need an image of Fred Cray. I think you're going to have a picture of him in this video. He was a grossly fierce-looking person. It was the picture of Dorian Gray. This man was a murderer and looked it. He was a vicious-looking person, very nasty, very heavy, intimidatory presence wherever he was. And he was in the front row of this special extraordinary meeting for Nugan. It was a bit unclear about why the motion was being put to the people at the meeting, but they were left in no doubt at all about how they should vote when the matter came to a vote, that Fred Cray, this fierce-looking person sitting in the front row, stood up and turned and faced the audience and just glared at them with that ugly face and put his hand up. And to be a brave person indeed that would go against this, up with the hands. Auditors were changed.
Nugan's manoeuvrings were condemned in Parliament, and Attorney-General Frank Walker appointed a Corporate Affairs Commission inquiry into the Nugan Group. Ultimately, Ken Nugan would plead guilty to minor fraud charges, while Frank Nugan was either murdered or committed suicide. He was found dead in his parked Mercedes-Benz on a lonely country road with a shotgun blast to his head. His death would bring about the collapse of Nugan Hand. As many suspected, Mackay was murdered to protect the financiers and distributors, those higher up the chain of this enormous drug smuggling network. Frank Nugan was that man.